a discussion, and the topic is to show the efforts of civil society and experts and government and parliament regarding decisions on visa liberalization, that this decision should be adopted until the end of this year, and we do not panic. We do not have hysterical attitude. We understand that situation is rather difficult, and we hope that this decision should be based on technical criteria, not on the basis of some situational circumstances or subjective factors. And of course, we can say that after Ukraine completed the plan of actions on visa liberalization, the ball is on the field of Europe, and it is there, so we understand that there will be new risks in the European Union and in relationship between Ukraine and other partners. That's why we are interested in that this decision should be adopted, and there is political will in Europe. But there are other factors that influence. That's why we want to demonstrate that we cooperate in this respect, and those organizations and analytical centers that are critical to the government and the pace of reforms or fighting corruption, they are thinking alike today. And maybe many of you know that we prepared communication memo, how to communicate the issue of visa-free regime with European partners. We should speak the language of facts. We should not go into emotions and panic. And we presented these materials in the Supreme Council and in the Committee of Foreign Affairs, and all the delegations and those who comment on this topic, they can use this document. Also, on behalf of civil society, we prepared a letter, and Serhiy is going to tell us about it, to the European politicians and European structures that are responsible for decision-making. And also there will be in Brussels, Iryna Sushko will join us, and she is joining us at the moment, and she will go to Berlin next week, and we should share responsibility among the countries. And also the issue of visa liberalization should not be connected with the pace of the reforms, because this will be catastrophic, especially if it correlates with the issues of the Minsk agreements. Of course, there are many issues, a lot of work to implement these plans on visa liberalization. It should be implemented effectively and sustainably, and at the same time we are ready to mobilize our efforts, our energy, in order that this decision come into reality. And I would like to give the floor to Hanna, who heads the committee in the Supreme Council on Foreign Affairs in the Verkhovna Rada, because Parliament played critical role at the last stage and in the process of implementation of plan of actions. And Anna, you are given the floor. What are your efforts in order to make this decision positive? Thank you very much, Alyona, for this state position. And you were able to join the efforts of journalists, civil society, and organizations. And we should clearly understand that a visa-free regime is needed by the state, and it's not only the opportunity to travel for the citizens to go to Schengen zone through 90 days. A visa-free regime also opens the opportunity for tourism, for economy, for security. It raises the understanding of the cooperation of Ukraine. This is the important step to Euro integration. That's why we should join our efforts, because many politicians speculate on the issue that the poor Ukrainians won't be able to go to the EU countries. We should reorient the discussion inside the country and to show prospects that appear in Ukraine with getting this visa-free regime. On Friday, I was in Berlin. There was a meeting in the morning in the office of Merkel with Christopher Hosgin, and they were focused on the results of Brexit, and many were disillusioned somehow. People saw this unpleasant result of the referendum, but we focused on the topics of Ukraine and the topic, when will Ukraine get this? And we should not speak about the process, that there are different mechanisms of suspension. We should focus on that Ukraine, separately from Turkey, Georgia, Kosovo, there is Ukraine, and all the decisions should be concerned with Ukraine, not other states. And there is no answer when, but there were some recommendations given to us to work more with deputies of Bundestag, to send letter writing campaign with explanation of facts why Ukraine should get it and why it is good for EU to provide this regime to Ukraine. And our communication and expert and advocacy campaign should be focused on these recommendations, and they try to distort our attention because they say there are different positions, and the matter of concern with some looting of flats and some instances, and they say about things that are not related. And the situation in the East, the war, and the reforms, and the situation in the East, this is war. And the Minsk agreement, they are not related to visa-free regime. This should be our clear position. Me personally, I would separate these issues, because after the Budapest Memorandum and other obligations, they should help us to counteract Russian aggression, economic aggression. So these are different issues. So I believe that it is very important to strengthen all our steps that are made by experts. The discussion should be held, and all these weak points should be removed, and we should state that there is Ukraine, and the Ukrainians should get, for example, in September, as we hear, we should deliver some campaign that should be clearly stated. And for example, that in September, Ukraine should get visa-free regime, and through the groups of cooperation that were created, we sent some the list of 10 risks and why they should not postpone the visa-free regime for Ukraine. We provided information to the groups of friendship, and we spoke with the members of the parliament. We have problems with financing. It's difficult to find funds in order to send delegations of parliamentarians who would communicate and who would convince those in Brussels and in Berlin in order to separate this issue from others and to provide this. And so we addressed from the parliament to the parliaments of EU countries and separate address, and we can address to the heads of EU, and we can send a signal. Maybe there was a separate visit, and there should be separate visit of the Prime Minister or other officials to Brussels to reinforce these efforts. So we are open. We should work in a constructive manner in order that, because I believe that if we postpone until later, they will speak about November or December, and it will show that they just try to distract our attention, and we should be optimistic. On our committee, we have 3 people from the United States, from Warsaw University. They are here, and I asked them, do you believe that Ukraine will get a visa-free regime till the end of the year? And Marco said, no, I don't believe it, and I believe or I don't believe. So we will hold the discussion to provide the answer that we will get this. So we have people who are ready to join in diaspora and global Ukrainians, and in order to get this visa-free regime. So we broaden the circle of our people, not only here in Ukraine, but in the European Union. We try to communicate actively and to coordinate our efforts with European opinion leaders, with analysts and journalists who can promote the position and who are advocates of this decision and who believe that Ukraine can get this visa-free regime. And I would like to give the floor to Vsevolod Chentsov, who heads the Department of European Union in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. Vsevolod, what are the anti-crisis measures that you implement in order to get positive decision? Because it looks like a long dialogue on visa-free regime, and we all understand that we did a lot of mistakes concerning the timeline and terms, maybe some communication faults when we tried to show that the European Union had double standards and that they had some special approach to Ukraine. We should just provide ourselves with a result to get this visa-free regime. And also the comments about the actions of the European Union, and also today it is important, we need result. So we should not tell about what we think about the steps and concerns on this issue. We should get a result. Thank you, Alyona. And as usual, this discussion is timely, and I support the issue of this memo. It's not the matter of whether to provide this regime, but the matter is when. So we are at the end of this process, and when we started the process, it was before the plan was presented in 2010. There were some consultations with the European Union on the provision of such status, and these processes started about in 2008, and in these 8 years Ukraine overcame came along the long way, and European Union at that time even didn't establish the criteria in order to get this visa-free status. And due to the efforts of Parliament and civil society, and the ministries, so we were able to go along this way. And we should coordinate our actions and to work with stakeholders and institutions and the EU members. The complexity of the process is that there is a broad range of stakeholders who should adopt formal decisions. That's why these procedures are long. They can be accelerated, but there are some terms. And I would like to stress that from the side of European Union and the heads of the institutions, there is support in the acceleration of this process, and it was stated during the visit of the President Poroshenko to Brussels at the level of President Tusk and President of European Parliament Schulz, and also head of European Commission. This issue was number one during the negotiation. And also during the visit of Prime Minister of Ukraine to Germany, this topic was seriously discussed, and we see that from the Chancellor also provided support. So where we are in the context of this decision-making at the level of Council, on the 20th of June, the Committee on Justice adopted the decision on the start of studying of legislative procedures, then the Committee of Permanent Representatives, and then the Council of the EU. And according to the legislation of the EU, if this decision is adopted, and it can be then adopted by the Council, and this is not this matter can be adopted in such a way. So it's difficult to fix some deadlines for the adoption of such a decision by the Council, and we expect that when Slovak Republic will be heading, so we will make this process more active, and the Committee of Permanent Representatives will review this decision. Also, this matter is discussed on the committees of Justice, Libe, and Committee on Foreign Affairs, and there are rapporteurs on these issues. And also, European Parliament President made many steps in order to shorten these procedures. So in July, or maybe after summer holidays, both committees will take positive decisions, and then there will be a trilateral cooperation at the level of bodies of European Union in order to adopt this decision at the plenary during the session of the European Parliament and at the level of Council. And September is the addictive term, the deadline that we can establish in our work with the stakeholders in the European Union. That's why the calendar looks like this. As to anti-crisis strategy, we agree with those comments and counter-arguments that are stated in your memo, and we use these instruments in our work, and through the embassies and working with the councils and committees, and we focus our work in order that this issue be reviewed individually. As Anna said, it is very important because in the European Union there are several legislative initiatives with these states were already mentioned, and the situation in each country is different, because for Ukraine that completed the criteria, and some indicators show that we are ahead of our countries. So that's why we insist on the fact that Ukraine should be reviewed individually, separately from other states, and other issues connected with the revision of our case. This is the mechanism of provision of this regime. Now there are discussions about the mechanism of restart of the regime, and the decision now. We know that the discussions are active in the European Parliament. So about the indicators for assessment to renew the regime, if this proposal will be adopted, so the increase of the people from third countries that are in the territory of the EU states, so different numbers are shown, the increase in 50%, and maybe this trigger should be lower, that the European Commission would introduce the proposal when there is a big increase. Then increase in refugee cases, then the decrease of in the sphere readmission when the state is not completing bilateral agreements, or the increase in the level of criminal activities in the country. So we take into account its negotiation process in the dialogue on the legislative initiative, introduction of visa-free regime, because we should react and take into account these proposals, and to show that there are no risks like this in Ukraine, even hypothetical. And in the memo, our counter-arguments are present. That's why I won't go in detail. If there are questions, we can answer. And the next is that we have enough of proofs that we have sustainable reforms, and the creation of anti-corruption bodies and other directions of reforms. And as of today, our partners in the European Union and other partners, they see that there is practical implementation of legislative changes, and moreover, they are ready to cooperate and help to introduce these changes. Next is we have to show that there is no vacuum in the cooperation, and that we are ready for cooperation in different spheres. And now we work jointly on other documents that structure our dialogue in all these segments concerning the visa-free dialogue, and the EU has the readiness to continue the work in this direction. So I give the floor to Iryna Sushko.
You have been involved much in public relations and awareness raising campaigns as an NGO. What is important now for civil society what should we do in order to push for and to get this decision this year? I already mentioned your visit to Brussels and your future visits to Berlin. What should we focus our efforts on? What are the moods in Brussels? Well, thank you for giving me the floor. First of all, you should not stop. That the speed which is fast and which we took with our colleagues who we see here, in our mind we have not much time for taking such an important decision, and our efforts you have heard today, our memo and in the responses of the speakers and in the counter argumentation which you can see in our presentation materials. These counter arguments they just explain the arguments which may our European friends have and our European counterparts have. When I was with a visit in Brussels, on a visit to Brussels, I provided their materials and I was supported by 150 NGOs. National Ukrainian Platform of Eastern Partnership, where Ukrainian civil society very clearly stated that we believe all criteria included in the action plan, they have been implemented by Ukraine. Ukraine does not pose any security risks for the European Union or other kinds of risks, and Ukraine is ready to monitor independently the actions of power and those reforms in the scope of visa liberalization, which is the main thing in time. This procrastination, it is not, we can't allow it. And we handed to Maria Gabriel in person our materials, saying this is procrastination is inadmissible. After that, we have clear plans, and on July the 4th, we again will have open discussion in Brussels, focused on details, on migration risks, which not always justify those fears. Are not justified where it concerns Ukraine. Alyona has already told about Berlin. This is the country where many decisions are taken and much depends on visa prospects for Ukraine. And in general, I would like to summarize what should be done, where to put more efforts, our consolidated efforts. I am glad that we are here not only with our colleagues and independent experts, but also with representatives of our government and parliament. This is our efforts. They should be oriented, focused on those official bodies of the European Union. And it should be focused on the fears of the European Union. We have already analyzed what fears they have. So now we should counter-argue on these topics. Nobody had any pink glasses, so we should put much effort and understand the baseline point from which we started our work. We can see that we have already moved rather far, and now we can already tell that among independent experts we are discussing development of the indicators of independent monitoring in order to go far the European Union so that we can show that we can monitor visa-free regime. Mr. Serhiy Sidorenko, Ukrainska Pravda, editor of the Ukrainska Pravda, I think that he may put some accents. I have a question about the definitions and dates of getting visa-free regime. Many dates in different other processes were named, starting with entering WTO. We tried to enter this organization for 7 years. We had been trying. So what about the dates of the end of this year for visa-free regime? Should we continue to name this date or just abandon it? I would like to focus on the other topics. I would like to support all colleagues in the unity. Yes, the situation is unique. We are here together, the representatives of the parliament, the government, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in particular, and civil society representatives. This is not always happens in the Ukrainian history, and we have unified position in this domain. All players, government and civil society, we have common positions, and I would like to tell you about the backstage of the previous of the last message of last appeal. We work under the pressure of the lack of time, but anyway we use all channels, all organizations, and we seek very quick replies from civil society organizations. No NGO responded to any of us. No, we have an absolutely complete consensus in our civil society that the EU is obliged, if it is consistent with its obligations, to provide a visa-free regime to Ukraine without any procrastinations. Otherwise, the EU may face the loss of trust, confidence on the part of Ukrainian society. Sometimes we are told that we are too strict, but this is reality. As concerns the dates, our leaders of the country may be not everyone on the stage may like my statements, but sometimes in our country the dates were used, which were too short periods for making some decisions, for going through some processes. That is why even now I'm shocked. On January 1st, 2015, we knew that it was unreal for visa-free regime. Then the Riga summit was named as a landmark when a decision will be made about visa-free regime for Ukraine, and we understood that it would not be passed. But at this stage, this is a technical issue that the EU will not have enough time to complete all the procedures for provision to Ukraine of the visa-free regime. Let's be more realistic. And yes, we can expect approval of formal decisions and I think it would be at the beginning of autumn, September or October. I expect that in September the European Parliament will put this issue on the agenda, but I'm not sure that in September the decision will be passed. I think it will be passed in October. Then in 1 month after that, the procedure 21 days after publication are given for decision to enter into effect. So now it is best to say about our expectations for this procedure to have been completed by the end of autumn. I suppose and I hope that the EU will cope with this timing. I am an optimist, it is well known. Unfortunately, I can't be sure now talking about this that the EU will be consistent with this date, with this timing, and we will have the visa-free regime this year. To my regret, the EU and Ukraine have such groups which are against visa-free regime for Ukraine. That is why, as being experts, we understand the complexity of the situation. So we try to explain it to the society and to political players. And besides those risks which are usually voiced out, I hope that we will evade such risks as Kosovo faced. What the risk in Ukraine? I'm afraid that some MPs, when they will see that there is procrastination with visa-free regime, they will use it for back steps for in other reforms. So we should proceed making reforms with the same speed, because otherwise we can then face longer procrastinations on the part of the European Union. Now this series of questions and answers. Ukrainian Independence Center. I have a question to Anna Hopko. You told that interparliamentary contacts are important among parliaments in your assessment or among countries of the European Union. What is the weakest link? And the next question. Andrei Umanets, internet portal Economic News. After your speeches, I understood that dialogue with Europe became contradictory, and the EU its decision can't be forecasted. Ukraine more and more remains alone with its domestic programs. So what do you believe in, and where do you base your fundamental?
Do you have other questions? No. Thank you for your question. I support that we should work with parliaments of EU countries. In May, we visited, together with the Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Parliament of Italy, and we saw many stereotypes and myths about Ukraine and what is going on here. And we also had one parliamentarian. She visited Crimea, and we also compared Venice Republic and their historic parallels in their state. That's why we should make efforts in order to work with the Italian Parliament and the French Parliament, where we see that in these countries there is Euroscepticism rises, and also there are some radical attitudes and populism. These countries, they are powerful in Europe. That's why we should pay attention to these countries, and also we should work on the issues connected with economic cooperation. Also, Hungary is very important. We should cooperate with them more. And also, we should not forget about our advocates and the Baltic states, Poland, Romania, and we should reinforce their voice, and we should provide information to the countries that are we should provide information to those countries who support us and who are willing or not willing to support us. So about the weak link, or fortunately, the decision visa liberalization for Ukraine, it doesn't need consensus, and this is very important. Of course, there are countries who are weak links in the European Union, if we are speaking about Ukrainian visa-free regime. And I have the rating, but I don't want to make it public. But if country is first, the second, or third in this list, if they are voting against, our regime won't be blocked, because procedures, they require qualified majority, not consensus. And about expectations of the European Union concerning Ukraine, I will explain. If we are speaking about visa-free regime and post-monitoring of visa liberalization, that is the problem for us. May be surprising, but I can state this because this is based on negotiations with these partners. They want to provide assistance to us, but they do not understand that in some instances their help can damage. And the European Union, some separate countries in the European Union, they are the supporters of the idea of the reforms in Ukraine. And they see the plan of visa liberalization as one of the major instruments to drive Ukraine on this way. Firstly, due to the plan, we adopted anti-corruption legislation. Maybe it's not ideal, but it's not bad. And it's more radical than in many countries of the European Union. We changed the rules of the control over documentation. We changed a lot. And the European Union, they do not provide this lever to Ukraine, and in the European Union, they do not see whether we will continue with the reforms when the aim will be reached. That's why the idea was to create a post-monitoring mechanism. And when we started in the expert community, our discussions with European diplomats and officials of those countries that maybe postponed the provision of this regime, we told them that the representatives of civil society said that they said that Are you for, are you against these processes? And we spend a lot of time communicating with them. The idea that it's a bad idea to postpone the regime, but it should be provided with some monitoring. So for us, these things are obvious, but for people who are in the capitals of those states and for diplomats and the ambassadors of those states who are in Kiev, it's not obvious. And this is one of the reasons why this postponement appeared. It's not because they wanted to postpone help to Ukraine. This is a misunderstanding. Ukraine is a difficult state, as any other state. This is the answer to your question. So, briefly, what I wanted to say about fixation of some terms, some dates, and we need to continue the work with the European Union. And if you don't fix important terms, it will be difficult for us to work. So these are our realia. We should have stimulus of our own, because otherwise it is difficult for us to complete those obligations we undertook. So this is my comment. As to post-monitoring mechanism, I would like to add, the idea is not about Ukraine only. This mechanism concerning all the states with which they have this regime, or to which, with those countries that this regime will be provided. And this is about the risks that European Union face in the Balkan region and other regions, and the situation with migration. Also, I would like to add to what was said by Serhiy. So this is the answer to the representative of Economic News Journal. We shouldn't bury the European Union today. The European Union undergo difficult times and challenges connected with the results of the referendum of Great Britain, but this is not the first crisis that the European Union overcame, and we believe that it will come out of this crisis. Maybe it will be different, but it will be stronger, and many changes are important, and maybe they are powerful, and this is a driver for discussion, but today we see that there is concentration of efforts in order to overcome these risks. And I don't know whether it was done intentionally, that you compare these issues of cooperation with a free regime and other issues. We should separate these things. If we are speaking about with a free regime, this is a very clear track. It has 4 directions. It is based on the experience of the Balkan states, and your issue about our aspirations. It is based on the experience of the European Union, and secondly, that we met the criteria. And the dynamics of the process shows that we are on a finishing line. So these are the last meters of this competition. Do you have other questions? No questions? So this free regime issue is important in a positive sense. It shows how much should be done, and it is important to have coordination of efforts of Ukrainian civil society and the European Union, and those reforms in anti-corruption sphere that were started, they are only started. They do not have the pace and dynamics we want, but they are started. Maybe 90% due to the plan on visa liberalization, and it shows that if we have European support and there is a will of European Union to have co-ownership of those reforms that are on the way in Ukraine, and the issue of visa liberalization and the implementation of the plan on visa liberalization are very important. And if you want that Ukraine undergo the way of reforms and that Ukraine is modernized and so there is no alternative to the European way. We are not speaking about the EU membership. We don't see that we will apply to the EU now. But we are speaking that we will be used being we will be cooperating with the European Union to develop, because we don't have other choice after this aggression and the situation Ukraine face. So this should be a pragmatic approach. I don't see any naive attitudes among the members of Ukrainian government or among the experts and civil society. Maybe there are some illusions, some ideas, romantic ideas in parliament that are heated by some populist forces. But I believe that Ukraine today is very sober about these issues and see the situation in the European Union, and Ukraine sets realistic goals now. I would like to thank our participants, all those who joined us, and also who watched us online. And I would like to announce our next discussion tomorrow. It will be dedicated to Ukraine and Italian cooperation. It will be at 10:30 in this hall, and there will be a connection via Skype with the ambassador, and we will be able to discuss the risks and challenges in Ukrainian and Italian cooperation that is very important for European integration of Ukraine. Thank you very much, everyone, and till the next time, goodbye.